Good evening. And welcome. The subject of the section we're in is fear and conflict. And I just want to refresh everyone's mind about what we spoke of last week. And that is that when you turned your back to the altar, when you looked outside of yourself rather than within, that act of turning your back on the altar caused a disconnection from your essential being and your sanity with a capital S. And that act itself was what caused every succeeding experience to be colored by fear. Having conveniently forgotten that you turned your back on the altar, you think that your fear is occasioned by what you're seeing. And so then, in order to get rid of the fear, you engage in trying to change the world out there, to change what you're seeing. When that won't negate the fear at all, the only thing that will negate the fear is what caused it. And what caused it was to turn your back on the altar. So let's keep this in mind as we proceed. And we will start here.
Fear is always a sign of strain arising whenever what you want conflicts with what you do.
Anybody not clear on what that means? I'm sure everyone has experienced the conflict between what they want and what they do. And many times you sacrifice your integrity by doing what you think you need to do, let us say, to survive. And then you live with the disturbance within you. Continue.
This situation arises in two ways. First, you can choose to do conflicting things, either simultaneously or successively. This produces conflicted behavior, which is intolerable to you because the part of the mind that wants to do something else is outraged. Second, you can behave as you think you should, but without entirely wanting to do so. This produces consistent behavior, but entails great strain.
I'm not commenting here because this is utterly and simply clear English. Continue.
In both cases, the mind and the behavior are out of accord, resulting in a situation in which you are doing what you do not wholly want to do. This arouses a sense of coercion that usually produces rage, and projection is likely to follow.
Mind you, at the bottom line, what you are doing that is not consistent with what you want is being done because you've chosen to do it. That simple fact needs to be very clear. You haven't done it because of circumstances, even though you might project your decision and your action out there in order not to have to take responsibility for it. But the fact is that you have said, you have defined the situation in such a way that you say to yourself, I have no choice but to do what I don't want to do. And so I am going to do what I don't want to do. And many times what you choose to do is not principled. And so you're going against your very own principles. And you feel coerced. Naturally, you feel coerced by the circumstances to act inconsistently with your own integrity. And then, once you blame your circumstances, that is where you let your fear erupt and be expressed. But you must not forget that the reason you are behaving the way you're behaving is because you have defined the situation such that you say, I have no other choice. My circumstances require me to be unprincipled. My circumstances require me to break the law. My circumstances require me to behave, let us say, in an ugly way, because I am so frustrated by my circumstances. When the fact is that you're frustrated because you have defined the situation and believed your definition and said you have no other choice than to behave in a way that is upsetting to you. If you remember that it's your definition and your choice, and that there are other definitions of what's going on available to you, then you will be empowered to make a change and not be required to blame circumstances. Continue.
Whenever there is fear, it is because you have not made up your mind. Your mind is therefore split, and your behavior inevitably becomes erratic.
That's called sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
Continue.
Correcting at the behavioral level can shift the error from the first to the second type, but will not obliterate the fear.
Why? Because the only thing that will obliterate the fear is to stop looking at everything all by yourself and giving it all the definitions you're giving it. Again, the only thing that will correct the fear is turning back to the altar. Continue.
It is possible to reach a state in which you bring your mind under my guidance.
Oh no. There it is again. Bring your thoughts under my guidance. It's getting monotonous, isn't it? But what is getting monotonous is pure simplicity. It's reminding you that the answer isn't complicated. And when you reach for my guidance, you are in effect turning back to the altar. You are choosing not to be independent. You're choosing to join. Joining occurs as a result of your connection with the altar in the middle of you. Continue. Start the sentence over.
It is possible to reach a state in which you bring your mind under my guidance without conscious effort, but this implies a willingness that you have not developed as yet. The Holy Spirit cannot ask more than you're willing to do. The strength to do comes from your undivided decision. There is no strain in doing God's will as soon as you recognize that it is also your own.
Now, the recognition that it is also your own might not come until your distress caused by your insistence to look at everything by yourself has become so uncomfortable that you arrive at a point where you experience the meaning of the words, "There must be another way." You might not have the slightest idea what the other way is. But when you arrive at that point, you face the option of abandoning your convictions and your willfulness and reach out for help, which again is turning toward the altar to break the isolation. There must be another way, and you don't know what it is, but you know that you cannot persist in your commitment to looking at everything by yourself. Continue.
The lesson here is quite simple, but particularly apt to be overlooked. I will therefore repeat it, urging you to listen. Only your mind can produce fear.
Let's emphasize the word your. Only your mind can produce fear. Continue.
It does so whenever it is conflicted in what it wants, producing inevitable strain because wanting and doing are discordant. This can be corrected only by accepting a unified goal.
Yes. Continue.
The first corrective step in undoing the error is to know first that the conflict is an expression of fear.
Now, this applies to any conflict of any kind. Continue.
Say to yourself that you must somehow have chosen not to love, or the fear could not have arisen. Then the whole process of correction becomes nothing more than a series of pragmatic steps in the larger process of accepting the atonement as the remedy. These steps may be summarized in this way. 1. Know first that this is fear. 2. Fear arises from lack of love. 3. The only remedy for lack of love is perfect love. 4. Perfect love is the atonement.
And the atonement is only available to you as an experience when you're willing to abandon what you are seeing as the world out there and going within into the silence and asking for help of God, of the Holy Spirit, of me, of your guide. It is one simple answer. The biggest aspect of it is that you must be willing to set aside what seems so all-fired important to you to be afraid of. To set aside all of the thoughts you have about it. To set aside all of the hurt feelings that you have about it. And to let your mind become still, so that when you say help, and you reach out and break the disconnection, you can hear and feel the response, the embrace, the clarity, the love that will infill you and re-inspire you to love. Continue.
I have emphasized that the miracle, or the expression of atonement, is always a sign of respect from the worthy to the worthy.
Now, I would suggest that you not start this with you and someone else, quote, in the world, but that you start this with yourself and with your guide, yourself and with me, yourself and with the Holy Spirit, yourself and with God. There will be less argument, less resistance from you if you will do this. And the response you get will acknowledge your worthiness and inspire the experience of your worthiness in you, and will then prepare you to turn to your brother or sister, looking for, sending out the messengers for, that will come back to you and confirm to you your brother's or sister's worthiness, which will then set into motion the circumstances, the dynamics that will allow your brother or sister to be inspired experientially with an experience of their own worth, and thereby have the capacity to recognize and acknowledge in you your worth. Continue.
The recognition of this worth is reestablished by the atonement. It is obvious then that when you are afraid, you have placed yourself in a position where you need atonement.
That position is with your back to the altar. Continue.
You have done something loveless, having chosen without love. This is precisely the situation for which the atonement was offered. The need for the remedy inspired its establishment.
Even more than that, the fact that it is impossible for you to become something you are not established the fact that you must, sooner or later, remember that fact. So that everything that follows your having turned your back on the altar will serve to be that which will lead you to turn around once again. It's inevitable, because what God has made cannot be undone. Continue.
The need for the remedy inspired its establishment. As long as you recognize only the need for the remedy, you will remain fearful. However, as soon as you accept the remedy, you have abolished the fear. This is how true healing occurs.
Yes. Pardon? Someone has asked me to speak to that. As long as you recognize only the need for the remedy, you will remain fearful. However, as soon as you accept the remedy, you have abolished the fear. How many of you have had the experience of having a serious, frightening, upsetting, disturbing problem? And you do turn to God, or you do turn to your guide or the Holy Spirit, and you pour out your heart, and you tell them what your problem is. And you go on and on and on, describing just how bad the situation is, what the dynamics are, what your best perception of the situation is, and you don't shut up long enough to hear the answer, because you are so preoccupied with the problem and all of its multiplicity of dynamics. That's it in a nutshell. As long as you recognize only the need, as long as you will let only the need fill your mind, even when you're asking for help, you will not be in a receptive mode to hear the answer. So, be aware of the need, express the need briefly, and then shut up and listen. And listen as long as it takes to hear the answer. And if it doesn't come tonight, then your next free moment or your next free hour, continue and persist listening for the answer without rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing the problem. Devote yourself to the joining with the Father or the Holy Spirit, expecting the answer. Microphone.
With that in mind, the recommendation that you just gave to start with yourself rather than with other individuals.
Start with yourself and the Holy Spirit.
And the Holy
rather
Spirit.
than yourself and your fellow man.
Right. Whereas so much of conflict can come from a result of relationship. Someone else pushing your button, Holy Spirit using your brother to push your button, and you're trying to understand it, one is trying to understand it. The need is there, but the complexity, I'm not sure I'm being clear. When in relationship, conflict can be more prevalent, appropriately dealt with, or brought to surface. To back away from that and just look at your own fears, the fear of attack, the fear of lack of love.
No. I didn't say to bring your attention to yourself and your psychology. I told you to bring your attention to the Father. Bring your attention to the Holy Spirit. Bring your attention to someone other than the one you're having the problem with. In other words, bring your attention to someone whom you do not have to be defended against. So that you might become defenseless.
It's that separation, that dividing, that being in conflict, stopping and saying, I need to turn to my guide.
Exactly.
And not engage in the rhetoric as you explain it. It's that fear of attack, which I know the course or the experience of perceived attack, that I believe makes this simple thing not easy.
That is correct. But perceived attack is the only way you can see any part of the kingdom of heaven when you're looking at it all by yourself.
Because if you are facing the altar in touch, then you will not misperceive the misperceived attack.
You will not misperceive an attack where there is none. and you will see what is really there, and the vision of what is really there that is provided to you will cause you to behave with love in that direction, which is the atonement.
I'm working with the perceived attack.
That's the
and
problem.
trying to separate from that. Is there any...
You separate from it by withdrawing your attention from it and redirecting your attention to the altar within, to the Holy Spirit, to me. You arrive at a point where you say to yourself, it is less important to me to defend myself against the attack than to be in communion with a brother whose spirit and presence will fill me with the experience of my invulnerability, the experience of my divinity, the experience of my utter safety, so that I might completely abandon the use of fear, and so that I might completely abandon any inclination to attack in defense of myself. You see? So that then you might be in a spontaneous, inspired frame of mind to behave in a new way with this one you had seen as attacking you. And if indeed this brother or sister who you had seen as attacking you, if indeed he or she was behaving out of fear as well, your benign presence and the gift of love that you bring to him or her will lay the groundwork for them to feel safe enough to abandon their fear as well and have the situation transformed.
That's reality. That is the purpose of the moment.
That is correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct. It is utterly simple. It only seems difficult because you are so convinced of the way you are perceiving things, having forgotten that everything you perceive will be perceived improperly as long as you are looking at it all alone, having your back to the altar. So no apparent threat that you experience is valid. It is the inevitable result of having said, Father, I'd rather look at it myself. Father, I would rather look at it all by myself. Father, I'd rather look at it and determine for myself what it is. You see?
I understand. Thank you.
You are welcome.
That's a big statement that shocks the sensibilities. No apparent threat is valid.
Thank God someone is saying it.
So in any situation where I think I'm being attacked, I'm wrong?